Hey, well, all right. I'm excited to be here with Clayton Wood, who is a longtime technology entrepreneur. And we know you, Clayton, from your time with Picnic, where you were CEO there for years. Welcome.
Thank you. Glad to be here.
And you are doing lots of advising to startups. You're also a partner at Red Stick Ventures, I think.
Yeah, venture partner Red Stick Ventures. It's a new food tech centered fund, just raising their first fund.
I imagine that a lot of startups in the food robotics space are probably wanting to get your advice because you ran one of the early, pretty successful food robotics companies in Picnic.
hmm
Talk about some of the conversations you're having and maybe some of the are there early stage entrepreneurs in the space that are coming to you say, hey, we have an idea?
Absolutely. I started getting inbound interest in being an advisor as soon as I left Picnic a little over a year ago, and I've talked to a large number of companies in the space. Many of them are at the same spot, which, given market conditions, isn't too surprising. Which is they've got an idea, they've probably got a product or a prototype, having trouble raising their first round, having trouble finding product market fit, and just trying to make that leap into kind of being a more mature company. And it's a tough spot under any circumstances, but in market conditions, the last few years makes it especially difficult.
Talk about this market conditions. I mean, one of the things about food robotics, it's a long path to getting into market. It's a lot of capital. And with the venture capital winter that is seemingly lasting forever, it seems like a tough time for food robotics companies.
It very much is. I know at Picnic we started in what I finally refer to as the free money era, where you raised one round just to get to the next round, and raising money wasn't really that much of a question. And now it's a huge problem. The challenge that food robotics companies have specifically is that as the market tightened up, became very conservative, and the conservative investors don't like hardware in general. Food tech is seen as a challenging category of hardware. So if you're looking at, show me when you're cash flow positive, show me when you're profitable, it's very, very difficult as a food hardware company to show that because it's such a new field. Product market fit is elusive, and being able to say when that those financial metrics will turn right side up is really challenging. So it's a really tough time for all startups, but I think food robotics, food hardware is especially a challenging category, has been for the last 2 or 3 years.
One of the things about Picnic was I felt like it was a next generation pizza food robotics company in that it was purpose built around building pizzas. It wasn't one of these where someone got a general purpose robotic arm and would just move things around within a confined space. And you're still seeing those sometimes.
Yes.
What are some of the, if you're giving advice to a food robotics company in terms of building out a system and thinking it through what ultimately may succeed in the market, what would you tell them?
Um, I think I think it's one of those signs. You're absolutely right about the arms and the big footprints. It's one of those signs of a new immature market. People haven't seen food robotics. They don't know what to think about it. We had people at Picnic at trade shows looking at it, and they're in the pizza business. They're looking at it and they're watching it make pizza, and they're like going, "But what does it make the pizza?" And, they just it's really hard to just wrap their head around it. I think the challenge, it's common to lots of technology companies, but especially true in food robotics. You've got to start with the customer. What is it that what's the customer's pain point, and what can they actually use? And unfortunately, not uncommonly, people start with what can my product do, and how can I make it do it in a real fancy, impressive way? How fast can it do it, or that sort of thing. And that those numbers are nice and you get people excited, but it's not really what the customer needs. And ultimately, the real challenge in food robotics is integration. How will your device get integrated into a commercial kitchen so that the kitchen can continue to operate, do what it needs to do, and do it, without disrupting the process? And until there are new uh, concepts that are really built around automation, and those are starting to emerge. Anybody trying to break into the retrofit market, as we were at Picnic, has a challenge of how do you get into the kitchen as unobtrusively as possible. And one of the things I used to say is no one who has a kitchen has a pizza robot sized hole in their kitchen that they're just waiting to plug it in.
there's a couple founders out there on the smaller side that I think are innovating. They're not a big chain. So you see like Andrew Simmons, which I think you talk a lot with. You see Lee Kindell up here in Seattle with
Hmm.
Moto, that are both of these guys, and I imagine there's others that are showing how you can be a smaller operator and almost build your new restaurant concept around utilizing kind of off the shelf robotics. It's not like a Zoom, like back in the day where they raised like hundreds of millions of dollars from SoftBank and say, hey, we're going to build our own robot, do this custom thing. They're say, taking a system like yours and saying, hey, we're going to build a new concept that is essentially centered around automation and kind of move forward. Does that? I feel like they're pioneering in a sense. Do you think that's going to be what we're going to see in the future? More people pioneering concepts that are leveraging automation because they think that's can help them scale better.
I would love to see that. I think Andrew and Lee are brilliant, and I'd say they're unfortunately they're at the far end of the open-minded innovator scale. They're both kind of willing to move things around and try things, and they're not just open to innovation, but they embrace it and they seek it out. I don't think that's really the persona that I'd use to describe most people in the restaurant business. But if you have that kind of open-minded approach, there's all kinds of things you can do and you can adapt. If you don't want to adapt, you say, this is the way I do things. Can you help me? That's where you run into an integration challenge. But I think what I love about what Lee is doing at Moto and what Andrew is doing with Mama Ramona's Pizza Roboto is they're showing how it can work. They're sharing real world experiences. Andrew is doing his whole build in public diary on LinkedIn, which I think is brilliant and super useful because he's sharing the wins and the losses. Um, but it shows that it can work. You've just got to adapt, and I think that's a lot of the product market fit in these early days is about adapting on both sides. The customer has to be willing to adapt a little bit, and the product companies have to go in realizing that they, regardless of what they may think, they haven't built a perfect machine, and they need to be willing to tweak and change and reconfigure to make the best fit.
Okay, you've been in this business for I think at least half a decade now. You're advising companies. What are you excited about in terms of food robotics? And are there spaces you think you'd like to see more entrepreneurs or inventors go in terms of building automation around food?
I would love to see. I am excited. I'm excited. There's some companies out there. I've seen some in the home space as well as the restaurant space who are who are starting out with products that already solve some of the challenges that we've seen really block some of the earlier companies. Um, Building devices that are drop-in replacements for a make line, for instance, acknowledging the fact that if you have the way a restaurant operates, um, workers are seldom just dedicated to a station standing there all day. The automation needs to work even if the person is only giving it intermittent attention. You need to see things like a holding station where if you're making, you know, 10 salads a minute, well, if there's nobody there to catch the 10 salads, they need to be suitably caught and retained and held there. And it needs to work around the way the workflow goes in the kitchen, which is multitasking, short staff, and it needs to solve real problems. And the nice thing is you can solve different problems and make it work. I've heard people say that, well, the automation didn't really save me any labor because I only had one person working there anyway. I still need one person working the automation, but the consistency means the cook goes well. The pizzas cook really well because they're all consistent. Food waste is another area where food waste is a huge problem, especially in the pizza category, but I think it's also a problem in other categories as well. If you can eliminate food waste, just food waste alone can pay for the system. So I think if you're an automation company or product developer, thinking about all the different ways you can add value, but it can only do that if it works with that particular operator. So you got to find the customer who is doing something the way that your machine is designed to do it. If you can make 200 dishes an hour, that's brilliant and it sounds really impressive. But how many restaurants are making 200 of the same thing every hour? Not that many.
Yeah.
And so you may not really have a big market if that's your claim to fame, and that's really the reason you want somebody to buy it, and that's how your economics work. If if people are making 20 an hour, is it still economical? Does it still pay for itself?
You mentioned home, and you're seeing some things that are exciting you, and you don't have to necessarily name names, but home has been really tough to crack for food robotics, and you're seeing some interesting ones that broke over some of the barriers that were challenging the past companies. What are you seeing there that's exciting?
I think I've seen at least one. There's a few. I think there's a few more that are. Home is tricky because it's got to be small. It's got to be versatile. It can't lock you into you can only use it if you buy our prepackaged food. I've seen one or two players in there who are solving that, who are offering prepackaged food or recipes, but you can also customize and add your own ingredients. But Making a pretty versatile device. I think that's a category that has promise, but it's especially tricky because even if you've got something that works brilliantly, you've got the whole it's a consumer market, and how do you break into consumer markets? You got to build a brand and get everybody's attention, and that's just that's a world that I'm less familiar with, and it's a pretty daunting challenge to break into that consumer market.
All right. Well, we'll be talking about both the restaurant robotic space as well as the consumer space at the Smart Kitchen Summit. Lee Kindell will be there. Clayton, you're going to be there as well, June 4th
I
and
will
5th
be
in Seattle, and I'm excited to see you there, man.
looking forward to it.
All right. Well, thanks for spending time with me today.